Every Monday morning, at exactly 7:03 a.m., a fresh bouquet of white lilies appeared at the steps of the Belmont Estate Chapel. Wrapped in ivory paper and tied with a pale blue ribbon, the bouquet always sat in the same place, right below the altar, where no bride had ever walked. The chapel had remained locked for decades. The villagers thought it was abandoned, but someone with a key, opened it just long enough to place the bouquet, then vanished. No one saw who. No one ever admitted to it, yet the flowers never wilted, never faded, and were always replaced before the last petal fell. The gardener once tried to install a camera near the altar. The next morning, it was crushed under a shattered vase. No footage, no answers. People whispered about ghosts, about a cursed love story. But the truth was much more human. Arthur Belmont was once the kind of man who didn't believe in ghosts or second chances. A real estate mogul with silver hair and piercing green eyes, Arthur had built towers that touched the clouds, but inside he was hollow. Everyone in town called him the Haunted Millionaire, though never to his face. They said he haunted his own house more than any spirit ever could, because what kind of man builds a private chapel on the edge of his property, only to leave it sealed and silent for 37 years? When Arthur first met Claire Delaney, he was still human. She worked at a small flower shop near the downtown train station, always humming old French ballads while arranging roses. He came in once, on a Tuesday, to buy a thank-you bouquet for a business partner. Claire corrected his choice of color with a soft smile. "White lilies mean devotion," she said. "Red roses are too desperate." Arthur didn't like being corrected, but he liked her. The next Tuesday, he came back. No occasion, just to talk, and the Tuesday after that. For almost 2 years, they shared nothing but stolen moments between customers and late-night walks through the garden behind the shop. But Arthur was ambitious, ruthless. His world had no place for hesitation or for a florist with dirt under her nails. When he finally proposed, it wasn't with a diamond, it was with an offer, a new life, a new last name, and silence about where she came from. Claire agreed, but with one condition: they'd marry in the chapel she dreamed of. A simple ceremony, lilies on the altar, and a blue ribbon around her bouquet, the same kind her mother once carried. Arthur had the chapel built in under 6 months. It was beautiful. Marble steps, stained glass, imported mahogany pews. A perfect stage for love. But Arthur never showed up. On the morning of the wedding, Claire waited in her dress for 5 hours before she realized he wasn't coming. No letter, no call, just empty pews and a forgotten promise. Arthur had boarded a private jet that morning for Tokyo, closing a multi-million-dollar deal. The media framed it as a business emergency. Only a few knew the truth. Arthur had gotten cold feet. Not because he didn't love Claire, but because he didn't know how to be loved by someone who didn't want anything from him. He never saw her again. Years passed, then decades. Claire moved out of town. Rumor said she'd had a child. Arthur never searched for her, never sent an apology. He buried the chapel under dust and shame, sealing the doors and refusing to let anyone speak her name inside the house. But then, 37 years after the wedding that never happened, the first bouquet appeared. At first, Arthur assumed it was a prank, maybe an old friend mocking him or a twisted admirer with too much time. But the flowers kept coming, always lilies, always Mondays, always tied with a blue ribbon. And with each new bouquet, something inside him cracked a little more. One day, he stood at the chapel steps for hours, staring at the bouquet but unable to open the doors. His hands trembled. He hadn't touched that handle in over 3 decades. Inside the house, Arthur started to change. His staff noticed it first. He began waking up before dawn, sitting alone at the breakfast table with a single lily in his pocket. He played piano again, just one song, over and over. A melody Claire once hummed while fixing his tie. The melody returned to him in dreams, each time more vivid. Once he swore he heard her voice coming from the kitchen, humming the same tune. He fired the housekeeper that week. Not because of the humming, but because she said, "I thought I saw someone else in the mirror with you, sir." Arthur didn't sleep that night. One morning something new happened. Alongside the bouquet, tucked between the lilies, was a note, 5 words. "She forgave you too soon." The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat, feminine, young. Arthur dropped the note as if it were burning. That night, he opened the chapel for the first time in 37 years. The air smelled like old dust and grief. And on the altar, resting beneath the bouquet he didn't place, was something that didn't belong to him, a pressed photograph of Claire holding a baby in her arms. Arthur staggered back. The baby had his eyes. Arthur stood in the cold silence of the chapel, staring at the faded photograph. Claire held the baby with a softness he remembered but had not seen in decades. The infant had his unmistakable green eyes and the same crescent dimple on the left cheek that surfaced whenever Arthur smiled, though he hadn't truly smiled in years. His breath caught in his throat. Had Claire? No. He would have known. Wouldn't he? He backed out of the chapel like a man leaving a tomb, clutching the photo as if it might crumble in his hand. He didn't sleep that night, or the one after. He stopped answering calls, cancelled meetings. His chef left trays of untouched food outside his door. All he could do was stare at the photograph over and over, searching for answers it refused to give. One question throbbed in his chest. Where is she? 2 days later, Arthur did something he hadn't done since he was 25. He returned to the flower shop. It wasn't the same one. Claire's old shop had been torn down long ago. In its place stood a sleek, modern boutique, Vivian Floral and Botanica, polished glass, minimalist font, imported lavender spilling from iron planters. Arthur entered cautiously, half hoping no one would notice him. The bell above the door rang. The scent hit him first. Lilies, fresh ones. Then a voice, light but firm, floated from the back. "Give me a sec, just finishing a bridal cascade." He froze. That voice. It wasn't Claire's, but it carried something of her tone. Like an echo buried in a different octave. A young woman emerged from behind a curtain of hanging vines. She couldn't have been older than 25. Apron dusted with pollen, fingernails stained green, hair pulled back in a messy knot. Her eyes were sharp, observant, and green. "Can I help you?" she asked, pausing when she fully took him in. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Arthur tried to speak. The words knotted. He offered the photograph instead. The woman took it, studied it in silence. Her expression didn't change. "That's my mother," she said finally. "Claire Delaney." The world shifted. Arthur gripped the counter to steady himself. I'm Arthur Belmont." The name hung in the air like smoke. The young woman's mouth twitched. "I know who you are." He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "Then, you know what I did." "I know what you didn't do," she said quietly, placing the photo back on the counter. "You didn't show up." Arthur swallowed hard. "What's your name?" "Lily." The irony cut deep. Of course it was. Lily Delaney, his daughter. He looked at her again. Really looked. The posture. The way she tilted her head when angry. Claire's nose, his jaw. A perfect blend of a life unlived. Why the lilies?" he asked. Lily's expression remained unreadable. "I didn't send them." His brows furrowed. "But the bouquets, every Monday." "I know," she interrupted. "They started arriving the week after she died." Silence. Arthur felt a cold stab in his chest. "She's gone." Lily nodded. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed too late. She didn't tell anyone, not even me, until the last month. He backed away a step. I didn't know. She didn't want you to, Lily said, her voice sharpening. She said ghosts should stay buried. But then the flowers started showing up. Every Monday. Tied with a blue ribbon. No note. No sender. I thought it was you. He shook his head. It wasn't. Well, Lily sighed. Someone wants us both to remember. A silence settled between them, thick, fragile. Finally, Lily gestured to a small bench near the front window. Sit. I'll make tea. Arthur sat. For the first time in years, his knees trembled. He stared at the polished floor while Lily moved through the space with efficiency. Everything about her reminded him of Claire. The way she measured water, the way she hummed absently while waiting for it to boil. And then the song hit him. The exact same melody Claire used to sing while watering her garden. Where did you learn that tune? He asked, voice hoarse. Lily paused, teacup in hand. My mom. She used to sing it when she was sad. He looked at her, and the weight of decades pressed down. I loved her, he said. I just didn't know how to choose her over the world I built. Lily sat across from him, eyes unreadable. She never hated you, you know. That's what made it worse. Arthur took a deep breath. I don't deserve a second chance. I just wanted to know you existed, to see your face. You have, she said. He stood. If you want anything, a house, college tuition, I don't want your money, she snapped. I've built this myself, every vine, every flower, without you. He nodded, ashamed. Then what can I give you? Lily looked down at her hands. Then softly, a song. Play her song. One last time. Arthur blinked. What? You have a piano. I've seen the photos, she told me. If you want to give something back, give her the song. That night, Arthur sat in front of the grand piano that had gathered dust for nearly 3 decades. It was nestled in the corner of the Belmont Estate's music room, half covered with a moth-bitten velvet cloth. The keys had yellowed slightly, but when he lifted the lid, they still gleamed under the chandelier. He pressed one softly. A low sea echoed through the hollow room, then another and another. The melody began to return to him, clumsy at first, like a man relearning how to walk after years in the dark. It was Claire's melody, not a song from the radio or something he had ever heard performed professionally, just a tune she used to hum while arranging flowers or brushing her hair. She'd once told him it belonged to no one but them. Now it belonged to ghosts. He played until dawn. The next morning, Arthur returned to the flower shop with sheet music in hand. Lily wasn't behind the counter, but a younger assistant pointed to the back room. She's sketching bouquets for the Dixon wedding, the girl said. Arthur stepped through the curtain. Lily looked up from a sketch pad filled with floral arrangements and paused, visibly surprised. You came back. I played it, Arthur said, breathless. I remembered every note. Lily stared at him. You actually did it. I want you to hear it, he said. This Saturday at the chapel at 7. Her mouth opened slightly. You're reopening the chapel? I'm not just reopening it, Arthur said. I'm giving it to you. She blinked. What? He handed her a folded document, a deed transfer. The chapel and the surrounding garden, now in her name. For the woman who taught me how to feel, he said, and for the daughter who taught me how to try. Lily didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, she folded the paper and nodded. All right, I'll be there. Back at the mansion, Arthur gave specific orders to his staff. The chapel was to be cleaned, the dust wiped from every pew, and lilies, only white lilies, were to be placed along the aisle. No publicity. No photos, just a piano, a man, and a melody that had waited too long to be heard. As he rehearsed, memories returned. Claire's laughter, the way she used to tilt her head back when she laughed too hard, her bare feet in the morning on cold tiles. Her eyes when she said yes, before he left her in silence. He practiced until his fingers bled. On Friday night, as the sun dipped below the hills, Arthur stood by the chapel and watched the light fall across the altar. He felt a presence then, not spooky, not eerie, but warm, like the air itself was remembering. He sat down, slowly, and for the first time in his life, he prayed. Not for forgiveness, but for the strength to honor the one person who had never asked anything from him, and for a daughter who had given him a chance he didn't deserve. The next morning, the chapel doors stood open. For the first time in 37 years, sunlight poured into the stained glass, scattering color across the floor. At 6:58, Arthur took his place at the piano. Lily entered at 7:01, carrying a bouquet of white lilies tied with a blue ribbon. She placed them on the altar and sat on the front pew, eyes on her father. The moment was silent. Then Arthur began to play. The melody unfolded slowly, gently, raw and unpolished, but full of heart. Each note carried a memory, each pause a wound. He didn't falter, didn't rush. He played like a man digging through grief with his bare hands. And when he reached the final note, he let it ring through the chapel like a goodbye. Lily stood, her eyes shimmered. "You did it," she whispered. "She heard you." Arthur's voice broke. "I hope so." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lily stepped forward, reaching into her coat pocket. She handed him a folded letter. "Mom wrote this before she passed. She said to give it to you if you ever found me." Arthur unfolded it, hands shaking. The letter was short. "Dear Arthur, I never stopped loving you, but I finally started loving myself more. Tell our daughter that her middle name is Hope, because she was the part of us that never gave up." Arthur pressed the letter to his chest, eyes shut. Outside, birds began to sing. And as the light moved across the altar, something shimmered near the stained glass, a small glint, like the reflection of water. Lily turned to look, but there was no one there, just air, just memory, but it felt full, alive. The chapel remained open for the rest of that week, not to the public, not to anyone else, just Arthur. He returned each morning, not to play, but to sit in silence beneath the stained glass windows. Sometimes Lily joined him. Other times he sat alone, eyes closed, listening for a voice that would never come, but somehow felt near. The Monday after the recital came with an eerie stillness. Arthur walked the long corridor of the estate before dawn, as he had every week for years. But this time, when he reached the chapel steps, the bouquet was gone. No white lilies, no ribbon, nothing. He stood there for several minutes, unsure what to feel. Then he noticed it, tucked beneath the chapel door. A single note, folded into a square, the paper slightly crumpled from dew. He bent slowly to retrieve it, opened it with trembling fingers. Only 5 words. "You played. I heard you." There was no signature. He looked up, scanning the trees, the hills, the empty road. Nothing. No sound but the wind. But inside his chest, something settled. Not peace, not yet, but a release. The tightness that had gripped him for decades loosened, like a fist unclenching around his heart. That afternoon, Arthur called the press, not for attention, but for legacy. He announced the official conversion of the Belmont Chapel into a community music conservatory, free lessons, recitals open to the public, scholarships in the name of Claire Delaney. At the center of the garden, a statue would be placed, a woman holding lilies, eyes closed, smiling softly. When the reporter asked him, "What made you change?" Arthur replied without hesitation, "A song, played too late, but heard all the same." The article went viral, not because he was rich or because the estate had finally opened its doors, but because the story behind it touched something universal. Regret. Redemption. A chance to speak without words. Lily, meanwhile, took over the garden. The vines flourished under her care. She began hosting floral therapy sessions for widows and young mothers. The bouquet never returned. But in its place came something greater. Life. As for Arthur, he aged quietly. Less boardrooms, more benches, less power, more presence. Sometimes he would still wake before dawn, expecting to see white lilies on the altar, but he no longer mourned their absence. Instead, he sat at the piano and played her song, knowing now that playing it once had been enough. Still, on the last day of every month, he left a bouquet himself. Not for Claire, but for Lily. The blue ribbon tied by his own hands, a silent thank you for the daughter who had taught him the melody of forgiveness. And one spring morning years later, when the chapel bells rang for a wedding not his own, Arthur stood in the back row, holding back tears. Lily walked down the aisle in a simple cream dress, bouquet in hand, white lilies tied with a golden ribbon. At the altar, before taking her vows, she glanced over her shoulder. Their eyes met. He smiled. And for the first time since he left Claire at the altar, Arthur Belmont did not feel haunted. He felt home. Some bouquets aren't left for the dead. They're left for the living, to remind us that some melodies are meant to be heard, even if they come too late.